Hi everyone, I'm Christina with Talking Glass Media, and I am here with these two experts to talk about defensible space. With me today, I have...
Hi, Rick Chase, Fire Marshal with Central Arizona Fire and Medical Authority.
And Ken Lain with Waters Garden Center, second generation owner of a garden center in Prescott, Waters Garden Center.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for being here today. And so we wanted to give a little information about the different zones around your house and what you can do to make it a defensible space. And then Ken is here to actually show us some plants that we can use, some landscaping ideas, so that you're not just living with rock. There's other things you can do and still have a defensible space. So to start in, we have the intermediate zone, which is about 5 feet, within 5 feet from your house, correct?
Yes.
So why don't you tell me a little bit more about that immediate zone?
Sure. A lot of people out there might know that as Zone 1 because we used to say Zone 1, Zone 2, and Zone 3 from your home as far as working on your defensible space. So now that it is the immediate zone, that is basically the 5-foot perimeter around your home. And so what we encourage folks to do is typically this time of year, every year, we want them to look around their homes and see what kind of things they can do to remove fuel if there was a fire. Because obviously fire needs fuel to burn. And so the goal is to protect our homes the best we can. So some of those items may include cleaning pine needles out of your gutters and off of the roofs, away from underneath your decks. Anywhere that you see the accumulation of those pine needles, it's a great idea to remove. The other thing we look at is any kind of weeds, vegetation that is dead. It ignites very easily. Firewood piles. A lot of people like to put the firewood close to the home in the winter so they don't have to trench through the snow and barefoot. And so, this time of year when you're not having those interior fires, you want to move the firewood piles away. Fire needs fuel, but also for a lot of folks that have been around here, when there is a large-scale fire, a lot of embers come from that fire. So what happens is those embers will fly through the air, and anywhere they land, they can ignite another fire. So this is the reason why we want to clear those combustible items away from the immediate zone around our house.
Rick, I brought a couple examples of plants you do not want to be planted in that first zone. And it's a lot of things that are like native. So I brought this one here. This is probably one of the most common evergreens. This is actually a mugo pine. So pine trees have a lot of pitch in them or a lot of resin. And so if an ember were to light on this, it would just go up in flames. So you want to use this one in the landscape because it's so low water, so low care, but don't put it under the eaves of your house because this thing will flame up and it's just like a big match torch.
Yes.
The most common one you can possibly find in any of the chaparral areas, I brought this one. This is a manzanita we grow. Manzanita is beautiful. It's got that red bark to it. It's evergreen. It's got this pretty flower to it. This also has a lot of resin. So this one you want to use out in that zone 2, 3, or in islands further out in the landscape. But don't put it near the wood pile. Don't put it underneath your eaves because one ember lights on this and it'll go poof. So these are things you probably want to clear out of close to that underplanting, those closer to the house areas, closer to the shed. You want to keep those further out so you can isolate them. Keep them where the firefighters can work on those and get ready to extinguish that flame rather than have it light in. And I'd say another ones you miss too are the pine needles on top of the roof.
Yes.
Rake those things off of there. That's fuel that just goes up really quickly. So anyway, that's zone that closer to the zone.
Yeah.
So important.
So, and part of the what we see coming out in the media a lot lately, as far as releases and notifications, is as you're cleaning up your home and the space around your home, is watch for those disposal days where the different transfer stations are open for free disposal of that stuff, so that you can get it off your property entirely and not have to worry about, oh, my dumpster's full, I have to wait till next week. You can just get rid of it.
Absolutely. Yeah, a lot of people will. They'll accumulate a bunch of their old trimmings and dried up branches from the trees that they've trimmed, and then if they don't have immediate way to dispose of them, just don't keep them next to the house because again, that's just a little pile of kindling. So, but those are great examples, Ken. What you brought is the plants that are more volatile, as we say, and will ignite much easier versus the ones that are green and have a lot more moisture in them. So
I explain a lot of this when I'm teaching classes. You got to think like a wildfire.
Yes.
So a wildfire will rage through the forest through the evergreens. And so, but once they hit an aspen grove, they immediately go right to the ground and they start to creep through that aspen grove. So firefighters want to fight the fire. Yeah. They want to fight it when it's on the ground. So if you can help them as a homeowner, keep those flames on the ground by eliminating ladder fuels. Get rid of those things that jump from the weeds, like you were mentioning close to the house, and it jumps into a manzanita, and then it ignites the juniper. It's all over at that point. You just kind of turn and run because the flames are so big. Yeah. If you can keep it on the ground, firefighters can take that on all day long and save the structures.
Yeah. Absolutely. Good points.
Absolutely. So, okay, so we have talked a little bit about the immediate zone. So the intermediate zone, you mentioned briefly about planting some of these more flammable. What about tell me a little bit more about intermediate zone, and is this where you would put your cleanup, your brush, that kind of thing, or would you need it farther away?
I would suggest putting it further away for sure. Yeah, your intermediate zone, it's 5 to 30 feet. So now we've talked about within 5 foot. Now we're going to go further out, but 30 foot is still not that far from a home. And our area of coverage, we're partly up in the pines surrounding Prescott. We're in Chino Valley, Paulden, Prescott Valley, Dewey, Humboldt. So we have all types of vegetation that we see out there. So when we do defensible space assessments, or we talk to folks about ways they can keep their property safer, it depends on where they live on what they're going to be trimming up and removing. Something else that Ken had mentioned within that zone of the house, and I mean this goes for all 3 zones around your home, is you want to trim your trees up 4 to 5 feet from the ground. So as you do have that ground fire that's creeping, it doesn't have a way to get up the tree and then move what we call into the crowns, or a crown fire, because then that fire is moving across the tops of the trees, and then it can from there spread further. So that zone, so for the intermediate zone, I would say the same thing. You just want to trim those trees up. You want to, anything that's dead and down, we say remove it. Trim up your brush, your plants. We have something we call islands of vegetation. So you can have a lot of the scrub oak, manzanita, any kinds of vegetation out there, and it gets pretty thick. Is you want to have islands of this. So what you do is you trim it out so it's not just thick, but you have areas that you truly have little islands. So if one did catch fire or an ember was to land in it, it wouldn't just run towards the house, but it would have to again move from that island to another. So it's a way that you don't moonscape your property. You still keep it pretty, but you also make it safe.
Islands are a great example of it. It does 2 things. One, it's pretty. So islands of plants cleaned up that are decorative are great, but also those, if you give them aisleways, and I would say the walkways, the driveway, these are all areas you're thinking, how can I help the firefighters maneuver in the landscape to fight the fire? And so if it's just one solid mass of overgrown vegetation, they can't fight that. But if you give them aisles, if you clean it up, they can get in there and take out those fires as the embers come in. They can extinguish that for you and save your structure.
Absolutely.
And bonus of having something like that, you've got yourself a little nature trail that you can walk around and enjoy.
Exercise.
Exactly.
Right? Hey, it's a win-win.
So, and do you have any suggestions as far as landscaping, as far as what people can put in those areas as well?
Yeah, I brought some examples. So I showed off, the pine trees and manzanitas. Those are things, junipers, the conifers, the evergreen plants that grow natively. Mostly they catch fire pretty easy. If you're thinking in terms of plants that have soft leaves, they're deciduous. That is, they lose their leaves in the winter. These are generally fire-wise or less prone to catch on fire. So I brought some examples of things like that. One of them is like this. This is a native perennial. It comes back year after year. This is candy tuft. It's one of the first things to bloom in spring. It blooms from April through May. It's a nice evergreen mounding plant. It's got a lot of sap to it. So the sap inside this is more watery and less sappy or oily. And so if a ember were to come in here and light on this, it would not readily catch on fire. Now, if you stuck this right in the fire for 5 minutes, eventually it would dry out and finally catch on fire. But this is one that would actually repel or reduce or keep that fire from creeping. It keeps it low and creeps slowly across the ground. So if you put this in your flower bed, it'll naturally help repel or reduce that fuel load that goes up in flame. So candy tuft's a great perennial plant for here. I'd say a top seller. One of the number one things, this is a wild flower. It's a snapdragon.
I love
Every yard should have at least one. Isn't that pretty?
They're great flowers.
It's just animals don't eat it. So javelina, rabbits, deer. It's got this pretty, comes in pinks and yellows and reds. I brought this one. It's a new color you'll find here at Waters Garden Center. But then again, this is very heavy in water type of sap, so it doesn't catch fire. Think in terms of camping. If you got that campfire at night, you take a brand new, just picked off an evergreen branch off a ponderosa, you throw that in the fire, it is instantly going to go poof right up, be very smoky. But if you were to take an oak or an ash or a native aspen tree and you throw that in the fire, it sits there and smolders. It doesn't just go up right away. So you need to think in terms, put plants like that closer to the house, or to put those in the islands to help break up that fuel load so the firefighters can fight that. So we're trying to keep the fire on the ground, and we're trying to keep it cool. These are plants that just burn they don't burn hot, they burn cool, if they burn at all. So pansy. Another one that a lot of folks will recognize this time of year, probably the number one seller in spring. This is a mammoth pansy. Aren't those pretty?
There.
It blooms all winter long. It's very soft, and just the foliage looks like it would be real slow to catch on fire. Yeah. Whereas this pine tree, pines are just go up. This is resin based or oil based sap. This is water based sap. The differences are going to be, this one won't burn very easily, or if at all. This one, even one ash, it's a mile in front of that fire, it lights on this is going to go up. So you got to be real careful what you're planting in those the closer you get to the house, the more you got to be really proactive keeping that fire on the ground.
All right. Well, these are some great examples and some great information. I love this. So we have one zone we haven't talked about yet, and that's the extended zone. Yep. So we're getting a little bit further away from the house.
Yes.
So talk a little bit about that, please.
Sure. So of course that is an important zone as well because of the fact that you have fuel in there that can bring it closer to the home. But if you've worked on your intermediate zone and now you get to your extended zone, you just want to keep that fire from coming to the house. That's the whole goal. So one of the things too that we haven't really discussed is all the dry grasses that grow here. Oh, yeah. And they are what we call the fine fuels. And we've seen fires in the wintertime. Just a day or two after it snows, we can have a several acre fire in the dry grasses because those fine fuels just dry out so quick. So if you do have those on your property, it's a great idea to mow them, keep them low. We always recommend to folks to walk the area you're going to mow before you do it because we have seen where a mower blade has hit a rock and had a spark come up and has actually started a fire that way. So we always recommend to walk it. If you use a weed trimmer, use the nylon cord. Don't use any kind of a wire or a chain. Some of them are chain because, again, if they hit a rock, it can create a spark. So dry grasses, mow those down. Again, the same thing with the vegetation. Take some of that vegetation down, create those islands, trim those trees up because, again, it's not always a fire that is itself moving, but it's the embers and where they land. So, and if your home is on any kind of a slope, we recommend even up to 150 feet out. And the steeper the slope, the further out you want to go because of the fact that fire goes uphill a lot quicker than flat ground. It's preheating the vegetation up the hill as it's moving, plus it's moving uphill. So it is just naturally moving much quicker. So again, we recommend that folks that live on any steep hills, non-steep hill, just always think further out. So
it's really good information. I had no idea about it makes sense about heating up ahead, so it's going to be going faster uphill.
Yeah. Anytime you've got dead wood, dead anything, dead grass, dead branches, the inside of a manzanita is dead. Think dead branches do two things. They burn easy, of course, but they also attract more bugs, more insects, more problems. So you'll find that it just spreads. And so for the health of your apple trees, your pine trees, trim those things out. Anytime you see dead wood, cut it out of there. Don't wait till winter. And then keep those plants, keep them healthy. Yeah. So two things we're telling folks right now, especially with their native stuff. One, fertilize them. Keeps them healthy, keeps the bugs, the bark beetle, the ips beetle, flathead borers out of the trunk of those pine trees, or the scale off of your pinyon pine scales. These are things that burn easily, but they really burn easily when they're stressed out. And so if you can fertilize, and I brought a sample, this is a food that we make. It's called all-purpose plant food. Evergreens love that. Keep your natives healthy. I would say your natives, fertilize them one time a year, just now, and then that's all you have to do. It keeps them healthy so that when that new ring of wood grows out, it gets rid of the damage from last year's insects problems. Keeps them healthy. Again, if you're healthy, you can take on a cold or a flu or take on things. Your trees are the same way. Secondly, we're seeing a lot of pinyon pine scale. It's a tiny insect that gets on the needle. If you look at a pinyon pine, it's got a needle about that big. If you look at it, they have little tiny dots on top of that needle. And that's an insect, and they're sucking the life out of that plant. A pine tree should be lush and full and tropical looking. A nice, healthy pine tree is less likely to burn than a dry, crusty, damaged, lots of dead needles in there. So we're saying put plant protector. This is a bug killer, and anyone can use this. You can do this. You don't need to be an arborist. You mix up in a watering can. You pour it right at the base of the tree. The plant will absorb this and taint the sap that the scale, the bark beetle, the Ips beetle that are feeding on that tree. It keeps them out of there. Keep those insects away from that plant, or you're just going to have issues, whether it's a wildfire or if you ever had to cut down a great big pine tree, ponderosa, it can cost you a lot of money to replace those, but it's so easy to keep them healthy. One application for a year it's good. So just one application covers you for the entire year. It's kind of like an antibiotic for trees, but especially those evergreen trees, it'll really keep them healthier. And that's the best advice I can give you. Keep them trimmed up, keep the dead wood out of them, and then keep them healthy.
Yeah, so bottom line when it comes to preparing for wildfire and making sure that your home is safe and secure is, first of all, being wise about what plants you're putting in the specific areas in the different zones, making sure that they're not easy to burn plants like manzanita or,
pine trees, junipers,
Thank you.
cypress, cedars.
I didn't want to say the wrong pine.
Yeah, you got it. Scrub oaks. Yeah.
And then cleaning up pine needles, dead wood, any waste like that. Take advantage of those transfer station days where you can do the bulk trash disposals. And then if you don't get to do that and you have a little time before you can actually dispose of that trash, making sure you have it stored far away from your home in a safe area. Did I miss any points?
I wrote an article a couple of months ago on pine needles because I see new folks, especially some folks that are, let's say, Southern California, they're used to fire. They start cleaning up this yard till there's nothing left.
Yeah.
That is not good for your plants. That will make you, yes, you got rid of the fuel, but it makes that tree stressed out because now it's having weeds compete. Those pine needles are there for a reason. It's keeping the sun from burning the soil, keeps the roots cooler. This is what keeps the plant healthy. So it's good to take some of those pine needles out. But I suggest, and I don't know what you think, Rick, but I would say keep a 2-3 inch layer of some sort of pine needle, some pine needles. Get rid of the bulk, but keep some there to keep that sun off of that soil so the tree doesn't become dry, crusty, and now it's a huge matchstick. So plant health, the health of the plant makes a huge difference. And moisture content, even on those plants that maybe are more prone, let's say manzanita, are more prone to burn, if you can keep the moisture count up. I would even say water your natives once a month, now through whenever the monsoons come. Don't go crazy. But just take a soaker hose, give it some moisture, run it for half a day, and let it hydrate those plants. And they are going to go through an insect event, a fire event, things that happen in your neighborhood. They're going to go through that better than let's say they're stressed out. If you're stressed out, boy, anything will take them out. So keep them healthy.
Yeah, and agreeing with Ken, you want some kind of ground cover there. You can call it ground cover, duff, whatever term you want to use, but it is good, and especially on a hillside, because if you were to take all that off, you're going to have erosion, and you don't want that. And then listening to you, Ken, too, talk about fertilizing the trees and whatnot is, those that have been around here quite a while, we had the bark beetle that came through a lot of the Prescott forest and killed a lot of the trees, and that just was so susceptible to wildfire at that time, which we did see from the Indian fire to several other fires up in our forest. So of course we don't expect people to go up in our forest and fertilize the trees, but it is so important on your own property to bring that health factor. And something else with trees, I've seen this during some defensible space property assessments, is folks that have large trees that are right against their home, and we've seen branches that are literally laying on the roofs, laying on the decks. Think about that. Even though it's more than 4 to 5 feet off the ground, it's still a great idea to remove those. I've even seen one time, it was a really cool place, but they had actually constructed it and built it around the tree, so the tree came up through the inside of it and through the roof, which again, you're trading off that cool look for the possibility of a fire spreading. But yeah, there's just a lot of things like that you can do to your own property. And I just always recommend to folks, every property's different. Everybody has different combustible items, different vegetation. Look around, see what fire would like to burn to get to your house, and just reduce and remove that.
Okay. Some great information. Now, if someone wanted to know a little bit more about making sure their property was fire-wise, is there a way that they can have that checked out?
Sure, yeah. If you're within our fire authority area of coverage, you can call our offices at 928-772-7711. We'd be happy to come out and take a look at your property and give some recommendations on how you can help, bring fire-wise aspect and give yourself a good defensible space.
Perfect. Well, thank you, gentlemen. So there you guys have a little more information on defensible space. If you want to have your property assessed and you're in the CAFMA zone, then definitely reach out to them, have your property assessed, and want some landscaping ideas so that you've got smart landscaping that's defensible still. Hit up Waters. They're going to be able to give you some great advice and some great direction.
Can I have them ask, too, once they come in, if you come into my place, we're there in Prescott, I've got a resistant fire-wise handout. It's got a list of plants that are fire-wise. They're free. We want you to be smarter, better about this. So ask for that. I'll be glad to get it to you. Or we'll give you the grand tour of plants. You can have beautiful landscapes and have them be fire safe. You don't have to have lunar, just rock, nothing but rock, only rock and some boulders. You can have beautiful and be fire-wise at the same time. We can help you with that.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for your time.
Yeah.
Thank you, Christina.